Here's a sentence I did not expect to type this week. A Marine Corps program built to search women at Iraqi checkpoints in 2003 just became one of the most talked about spy shows on television. That's not a coincidence, and it's not marketing spin either. It's the actual origin story of Paramount Plus's Lioness, and Season 3 just dropped a trailer that suggests the show is about to get bigger, meaner, and a lot more personal than anything we've seen from it so far. I've spent the last few days digging through every scrap of information Paramount has released, cross-referencing it with the real military history the show borrows from, and pulling apart exactly what this new season is setting up. So if you're a fan of the series, or you just heard the name Lioness and want to know what the fuss is about, stick around. This is going to be a deep one. Let's start with something most casual viewers don't know. Lioness is not just a cool title somebody invented in a writer's room. It's named after a real program. Back in 2003, when the United States invaded Iraq, commanders ran into a very specific problem. At checkpoints, male Marines could not search Iraqi women without violating deep cultural and religious norms. That created a security gap, and insurgents figured it out fast. Women were being used to smuggle weapons and explosives past checkpoints precisely because nobody could search them. The Marine Corps' answer was to attach small teams of female Marines to combat units so they could handle those searches. The unofficial nickname for these women was Team Lioness. It started as an improvised fix, not a formal program, and the women involved often got pulled from clerical or support roles with almost no specialized training before being sent into hostile checkpoints. Here's the part that actually matters for the bigger picture. Team Lioness worked well enough that it became the blueprint for something much larger. Female engagement teams, sometimes called FETs, and later cultural support teams in Afghanistan. Researchers who studied these programs found real value in giving women access to conversations and spaces male soldiers simply couldn't enter. And there's a policy angle here, too. The documented success of these teams became part of the evidence used when the Pentagon rescinded its combat exclusion policy for women in 2013, a rule that had kept women out of direct ground combat roles. So when Taylor Sheridan built a fictional CIA thriller around this concept, he wasn't inventing female operatives from nothing. He took a real, undertold chapter of military history and asked a very Sheridan question. What if these women weren't just doing searches, but were trained, deployed CIA assets infiltrating terrorist networks from the inside? That's the jump from history to fiction, and it's a big one. The real Lioness women were largely untrained volunteers doing an urgent, dangerous job with minimal preparation. The show's operatives are elite, embedded, and running years-long undercover operations. Sheridan kept the emotional core and the moral weight, but turned the volume all the way up on the danger. Knowing that origin changes how you watch the show. Every time Joe or Cruz risks blowing their cover, there's a real historical echo behind it, even if the missions themselves are pure spy thriller invention. Quick context for anyone jumping in fresh, and a refresher for the rest of us. Lioness follows the CIA's Lioness engagement team, led by Station Chief Joe McNamara, played by Zoe Saldaña. The program embeds trained female operatives directly into the families and networks of terrorist targets, building trust over months or years to extract intelligence no drone or satellite could ever get. Season 1 introduced the brutal cost of that kind of undercover work through Cruz, a Marine recruited into the program and thrown into an operation that pushed her past what she was prepared for. Season 2 moved the threat closer to home, bringing in a new operative to infiltrate a domestic-facing danger rather than a purely overseas one. Through both seasons, Joe has been caught between two irreconcilable lives. The calculating handler who sends young women into extreme danger, and a mother and wife trying to hold a family together while carrying secrets she can never fully put down. Nicole Kidman's Caitlin Meade and Michael Kelly's Byron Westfield have functioned as the CIA leadership layer above Joe, and Morgan Freeman's Edwin Mullins has represented the political machinery in Washington that ultimately decides which missions get greenlit and which operatives are considered acceptable losses. That's the foundation. Now let's talk about what Season 3 is building on top of it. Paramount released the official Season 3 trailer on July 16th, and there's a real shift in scale here compared to the first two seasons. According to the show's own official description, Season 3 is built around three forces colliding at once: hidden networks, foreign operatives, and personal betrayals. That phrasing is doing a lot of work. Seasons 1 and 2 were mostly about a single mission with a single primary threat. This season sounds structurally different. Multiple threats, multiple fronts, converging on Joe simultaneously rather than sequentially. The trailer itself backs that up. It mixes intense combat footage, including a sequence showing drone swarms in a way that reads as genuinely unsettling modern warfare, with quieter, heavier character beats about what it actually costs to live a double life for years at a time. Morgan Freeman's Edwin Mullins gets the trailer's closing line, essentially conceding that the operation is being launched without full control over the outcome, and that whatever happens next, the people involved will have to live with it. It's a short line, but it sets the tone. This season isn't being framed as a clean win. It's being framed as damage control from the start. Reporting around the trailer also confirms the show is going global this time. Previous seasons kept a tighter geographic focus. This season is described as pushing the Lioness team's most dangerous mission yet, spread across a wider map of foreign operatives and hidden networks rather than one contained target. And then there's the personal life thread, which multiple outlets covering the trailer picked up on immediately. Joe is described as walking the line between duty and home while unseen forces circle her world. That's a meaningful escalation. In earlier seasons, Joe's home life was mostly a pressure valve, a place she retreated to and struggled to be present in. This season, the trailer suggests her personal life isn't separate from the danger anymore. The threats aren't staying contained to the mission. They're reaching into the parts of her life she's tried hardest to protect. The ensemble for Season 3 is genuinely stacked. I want to run through it, because a few of these names carry real weight for where the story seems to be heading. Zoe Saldaña returns as Joe, once again serving as both lead and executive producer, which usually means she has real creative input into how her character develops, not just how she's directed. Nicole Kidman is back as Caitlin Meade, also an executive producer on the series. Michael Kelly returns as Byron Westfield. Morgan Freeman returns as Edwin Mullins. That's four returning heavyweight names anchoring the leadership layer of the show, which tells you Sheridan isn't shaking up the command structure. He's using a stable, trusted core, so he can afford to destabilize everything happening underneath them. Below that layer, the show brings back its wider ensemble. Lancelot Oliveira as Cruz Manuelos, Dave Annable as Neil McNamara, Jill Wagner as Bobby, LaMonica Garrett as Tucker, James Jordan as Two Cups, Genesis Rodriguez as Josefina Carrillo, Austin A. Bear as Randy, Jonah Wharton as Tex, Thad Luckenbill as Kyle McManus, Hannah Love Lanier as Kate McNamara, and Ian Bowen as Grady. A couple of these are worth pausing on. Dave Annable and Hannah Love Lanier play Joe's husband and daughter, which lines up directly with the trailer's emphasis on her home life being under pressure this season. If the writers are pulling that thread harder than before, expect Neil and Kate to get more screen time and more consequence than in previous seasons, not just brief domestic interludes between missions. Behind the camera, Sheridan serves as executive producer alongside a long list of names, including David C. Glasser, Ron Burkle, David Hutkin, Bob Yari, and Keith Cox, among others. That's a heavy producing team, which tracks with a show that's become one of Paramount Plus's flagship originals rather than a side project. Now let's speculate a little based on the patterns in Sheridan's other work and what's actually been confirmed so far. Sheridan has a recognizable habit across his shows, from Yellowstone to Tulsa King to 1923. He tends to build a season around one central image or idea, then structure everything else around testing it. For Lioness, the Season 2 idea was proximity, bringing danger physically closer to home soil. Based on the trailer language, Season 3's idea looks like convergence. Multiple threats that used to be separate are now overlapping, and Joe no longer has the luxury of handling them one at a time. That matters because it changes the type of tension the show can generate. A single threat season lets you build toward one climax. A convergence season lets you build dread from multiple directions at once. which is a harder trick to pull off, but when it works, tends to produce some of the most memorable stretches of prestige television. Think about how Breaking Bad's final stretch worked. Not because one thing went wrong, but because everything Walter White had been juggling came apart at the same time. If the show follows through on that structure, expect Season 3 to spend less time on a single clean mission arc and more time on Joe trying to keep separate fires from merging into one uncontrollable blaze, professionally and personally at the same time. There's also a real-world layer worth watching. The Lioness franchise has always used its fictional missions as a lens on genuine debates about women in combat roles, debates that are still active in defense policy circles today. With the show explicitly going global this season, it's worth watching whether the writers use that wider map to touch on any current geopolitical flashpoints. The way Sheridan's other shows often lift real headlines and file the edges off just enough to dramatize them. Point one more thing worth knowing before you go binge the trailer for the 10th time. Lioness isn't just a hit show existing in isolation. It's become part of Paramount's core strategy of building interconnected prestige dramas around Sheridan. The same playbook that turned Yellowstone into a multi-show universe. A returning ensemble this strong, paired with a global expansion of the story, suggests Paramount is treating Lioness less like a contained miniseries and more like a long-term flagship property they intend to keep building on for years. That context matters if you're trying to guess how Season 3 ends. Shows built to continue for multiple more seasons tend to avoid fully resolving their central tensions. Don't expect the Joe versus her double life conflict to get neatly solved this year. Expect it to escalate into something that sets up Season 4. Oh, here's where that leaves us. Lioness Season 3 premieres Sunday, August 2nd, 2026, on Paramount+, with new episodes releasing weekly rather than all at once. If you haven't watched the first two seasons, they're both available on the platform now, and given how much Season 3 seems to be building on established relationships, especially Joe's family dynamic, I'd genuinely recommend catching up rather than jumping in cold. What we know for certain: multiple threats converging at once, a mission described as global in scope, a home life that's no longer a safe retreat, and a returning cast that reads like a murderer's row of award winners. What we're guessing at: how far Sheridan is willing to push Joe before the show finally makes her choose between the mission and her family for real, instead of just implying the choice is coming. Either way, 4 weeks from now, we'll have real answers instead of trailer footage. I'll be covering the premiere the moment it drops, so if you want that breakdown, you know what to do. Let me know in the comments which returning character you think gets hit hardest this season. My money's on Cruz. See you in the next one.